Story 1. My niece went from being a methamphetamine-addicted felon who could not take care of her children and was bouncing in and out of jail to a respectable, reliable member of society. There was no fanfare. She quietly went about changing her life. Most of us had written her off as a lost cause. My sister, her mother, had assumed legal custody of her children. And she changed. She did what she needed to do to get her life back on track. Took a while, but it is one of the most amazing and remarkable turnarounds I have ever seen. Story 2. My brother's friend grew up with a pretty rough home life. As a result, he spent a lot of time at my house and more or less became an additional sibling and child in our home. My parents even offered to let him live with us after he graduated from high school. Fortunately for him, he was able to get a full scholarship to a prestigious university and made friends with a group of wealthy students who let him live in their nice shared rental. They often gifted him experiences or gently used really nice items. He graduated with honors and earned a six-figure income out of college. He has since married and made a life for himself in our hometown. I don't know how much contact he has with his family, but he is still close to mine. Story 3. Affluent family. Star college track athlete. Olympic hopeful. Knee injury. Surgery went well. Full recovery predicted. Prescription for oxycodone for the pain. Addiction. Expanding drug problem. Begins using heroin. Homeless. 4 felony convictions for crimes to feed the addiction. Life without parole in prison. Story 4. He was a law-abiding, productive member of society with a great career, home, and family. Then one day, he decided to go to the casino for fun. 2 years later, he was a convicted felon with no home, fewer family members, and no career. 180-degree turns are not always good things. Story 5. My brother spent his late teens and mid-20s being dishonest, thieving, and directionless. He flunked out of college despite being extremely bright. Then one day he decided that enough was enough. A switch flipped in his brain or something, and he went back to school for electrical engineering. He graduated at the top of his class and now has a stable, well-paying career. His relationship with the family has never been better. I could not be more proud of him. Story 6. It is more common to see the mighty fall than to see someone climb from the bottom to the top. I commend those people. Story 7. My sister had a string of bad boyfriends in high school, and one of them introduced her to drugs. She married a man after knowing him for 8 days. He was abusive and abandoned her, so she turned to her dealer, whom she married after divorcing the first man. They had a child and were caught selling drugs and storing them under the baby crib. The child was taken by the state. My sister and her husband went to jail. She realized she had made serious mistakes and vowed to make a change. She went to rehabilitation and completed every step needed to regain custody of her child. Her husband did not change. My sister became pregnant with her second child but left him before the baby was born. They divorced. She remained clean, remarried an amazing man, secured a good job, and had another child. She has been sober for 19 years. I am deeply proud of her. Story 8. A friend of mine is a good kid, if a bit rambunctious and somewhat of a troublemaker. He is definitely on track for a solid living, as he can fix anything and is always keeping himself busy tinkering with things. Not book smart, but certainly not someone who would struggle to survive if left to his own devices. He was in an accident that left him with a severe traumatic brain injury, among other things. Long story short, he ended up addicted to drugs and was in and out of rehabilitation centers, constantly getting into trouble. The good news is that he turned his life around and has been clean for years. He has a family and, although still not very bright, is living a good life. I am proud of him through and through. Story 9. A friend who had a severe methamphetamine habit served a year in prison and attended drug court school. He got a job, swore off drugs, and moved to be closer to his only son. He cleaned up successfully and started working with a local group that helped wayward youth overcome drug addiction and stay clean. Story 10. I can only speak for myself. I was 13 years old, overweight, sick all the time, prone to violent outbursts mimicking my biological father, and actively researching the most painless and foolproof methods for ending my life. I started running. At first, I could only make it a couple of 100 feet. My ankles felt like they would burst into flames, but I leaned into the pain because it felt like something other than despair. I kept running. Within a year, I was fit, swore off violence, and found several compelling reasons to live. I got energized by bananas and Diet Cola and ran 13 miles one afternoon like it was nothing. I have fallen back into the pit several times in my life, but I always claw my way out toward the light. Running has always been the fulcrum. I would be dead without it. Story 11. 3 years ago, I was completely paralyzed due to a neurological condition. I was bedridden and dependent on caregivers. As of this month, I am almost a qualified teacher and have completed my first 5-kilometer run. A doctor told me years ago to accept my life for what it was. I never stopped fighting, and now you would never know that anything was ever wrong with me. Story 12. Dear friend used to be a self-centered banker and cryptocurrency enthusiast with negative views on women. He was wealthy at a young age and had a genuine marriage of convenience with a trophy wife. He was driving alone on a rural road during the holidays and had a car accident where his vehicle flipped. He suffered a head injury, and the car's heating system malfunctioned, causing heat stroke that led to an actual stroke. It took him 3 months to emerge from a coma. He was no longer good at math and developed a soft and friendly personality, unusually so for him. He immediately requested drawing supplies. He has few memories from before the accident and still does not. He is no longer rich, works as a professional artist, and he and his trophy wife truly fell in love. He is extremely happy. He discarded all his business suits, now wears only Hawaiian shirts, has many dogs, identifies as bisexual, and creates erotic ceramics. Story 13. A friend of a friend was heavily involved with methamphetamine at the time, already a couple of years deep. He would regularly play scratch-off lottery tickets and frequently explained that if he spent enough overtime, he was guaranteed to win sometimes. No amount of actual math helped him understand, so after buying his drugs, he would happily spend the rest on scratch-off tickets. Well, you would not believe it, but that person won $30,000 on a $5 scratch-off ticket. He sobered up, bought a car so he could get a better job, and is now living happily as a nighttime janitor for a school. Sometimes, I wish I could explain to the billionaires of the world how 0.0001% of their wealth could completely change a life, but I am so poor I would be judged for even thinking about having a conversation with one of them. Regarding the math, 0.000001% of $1 billion equals $10, while 0.0001% of $1 billion equals $1,000. Story 14. An old friend of mine was rootless and disconnected. She started feeding the homeless and found her calling. I am proud to have answered her first request for items for the homeless. I sent bundles of gym socks. Now she is internet famous. Her nonprofit organization is completely driven by donations via social media. She has won several awards. She has provided the connective tissue for many people to move forward. It is the biggest turnaround I have ever seen. Story 15. Probably mine. I went from an alcoholic dead-end job in jail to a college graduate and middle school teacher with a master's degree. Story 16. My own when my wife and I got divorced. I changed my style, went back to an old career path, and improved my life. Nothing against my ex-wife, we just wanted different things. She is doing well, and so am I. Story 17. A guy used to be my friend. He had a family, 4 kids, a stand-up guy. He would give you the shirt off his back to help out. During COVID-19, he developed some bad habits, drugs or alcohol, I don't know which. Family gone. None of the kids are allowed to be with him. He stole from my house and is now homeless. He ran out of friends to couch surf with and steal from. No idea where he is and hope he sorts his problems out before hurting his kids more. But I am done. Story 18. I know a man whose daughter disowned him and did not return phone calls or letters for 10 years. After he became sober for a few years, his former wife allowed him to come back into their lives. He ended up walking his daughter down the aisle and is truly a pillar in his community today. I have seen the other kind of complete turnaround as well, but I prefer to think about the positive stories. Story 19. Robert Downey Jr. was convicted for possession of an illegal firearm, cocaine, and heroin, serving 15 months of his original 3-year sentence in prison. This occurred between 1996 and 2000. In 2015, the governor of California pardoned him for his actions. Today, he is one of the richest actors in the world. Fun fact: his son also struggled with drug use at a similar age, was charged with possession, and went to rehabilitation while receiving strong support from his father. Story 20. The diddler comes to mind, from keys to New York to life imprisonment or suicide. Story 21. My life changed after I took my wife's advice and talked to my doctor about taking antidepressants, combined with individual therapy and couples therapy. I didn't notice it at first until one day she said, "It's like you're a different person. Little things that used to set me off and make me miserable for hours or days are now nothing." Looking back, it's clear I should have done this sooner. Story 22. My sister was married and has 4 children, 2 adults who live independently and 2 preteens. She began using methamphetamine, suffered a hemorrhagic stroke, and moved into our parents' old house, which needs a complete renovation. She is also supporting and involved with the drug-addicted ex-husband of our stepsister. It is a difficult situation, and she blames her children for her actions. It is heartbreaking. Story 23. My younger brother, who was in his 2nd year of high school and had a good part-time job, decided to rob a store with a knife and was jailed for months. After his release, he wore an ankle monitor for almost a year. Then he dropped out of high school and started scamming people by selling fake phones under our parents' names. Now he is jobless and without a high school education. Story 24. It was my 23rd birthday. I weighed 300 pounds and was tired of life. I asked for a gastric sleeve surgery, received family support, went through the process on my own, and now I am 24, weighing around 226 pounds, and preparing for my Krav Maga green belt test on Saturday. I am not yet at my goal weight, but am doing much better. I am still feeling depressed, though. Story 25. 1. I volunteered for a homeless ministry for 10 years. It was not a place that just offers food and shelter, but an organization focused on rehabilitation, job and skills training, and a community of supporters who helped the ministry's clients. I encountered hundreds of people who got off alcohol and drugs and got their lives together. 2. A colleague of mine always threw an Oktoberfest party. It was an absolute blast. Being in the advertising community, it was a pretty interesting and diverse group of people. There was an art director at the agency who had some issues. She had made many bad decisions in life, including her choice of boyfriends and drinking too much. The party was in full swing. Even the agency president showed up. He was in his late 50s. His wife was elegant, kind, and refined. She did not deserve him. The art director and her biker boyfriend arrived with a Rottweiler on a leash. They were completely drunk and out of their minds. The host and his wife made the biker tie the dog outside while the art director fixed herself a couple more drinks. While the agency president was mingling, his wife Katie was making polite conversation when the art director stumbled up and said, "Hey Katie, so, where's your asshole husband?" There was a collective gasp. Katie looked at her and said, "Excuse me, I say, where's your asshole husband?" Swang. She thought about what she said and added, "I mean, he's an asshole in the nicest possible way." Katie replied, "Well, that's a relief." For the next 30 seconds, the art director tried to dig herself out of the situation but only made it worse. Meanwhile, a colleague told me, "Chris, do something." I dragged her out to the front porch where she immediately vomited into the bushes. I asked someone else to watch her while I found the biker boyfriend. I'm 5 feet 10 inches tall and the guy was about 6 feet 5 inches. He was stoned, drunk, or both. I said, "Belle is really sick. I think you need to take her home." Fortunately, they lived a few blocks away, so no driving was involved. He did not want to go and was angry about having to tie his dog outside to keep it away from frightened partygoers in the hot tub. I had to persuade this angry, intoxicated biker to take his girlfriend home. I think it was a 50-50 chance I would get into a fight. They finally left, the Rottweiler barking the entire way. The next day, Sunday, the art director came to the office hungover and asked what happened. When I told her, her eyes widened. and she vomited into my trash can. She immediately called the boss's house, reached Katie, and apologized. Katie, to her credit and my admiration, never told her husband about the incident. The art director realized she had a serious problem, cleaned up her act, ended the relationship, and salvaged her career. She even married a good man a few years later. Story 26. I went to college with a girl who was an avid partier. She was super nice and very smart, but every night she either got hammered or was high on something and was at the club every night. This was in Miami too. I ran into her the other day after not seeing her for 15 years. Now she is very religious, does not drink or party anymore, and goes on mission trips multiple times a year. People do grow up and change their habits, but that was one extreme to another. Story 27, my own. I went from drinking a 12-pack a night and smoking marijuana every day. I met the love of my life, had a child, and now I have been sober for 6 years. Story 28, my sister. When we were growing up, my sister and I were about 18 months apart, me being older. She was the one who had good grades, was popular, and had musical talent, while I struggled early on in school and was often in trouble with parents and teachers for just sliding by. My jobs were often dead-end, entry-level jobs, and she worked her way up to lead cashier and even manager of a small store. She had 2 kids and was married, and I was happily single. Then things changed very quickly. She lost her job as manager. At first, she said she was fired. Then she said she quit. This was less than a month after she was begging our mom for $100 that she needed to have by the time she got home. Then we learned that her husband wasn't just smoking weed, but that he was into much harder drugs. This led us to wonder if that $100 was not for her, but so he could get his next hit, or if he owed his dealer money. Oddly enough, she said that her neighbors gave her the money with no expectation to pay it back. She lived in a rough neighborhood at that point, and I did not believe that for a moment. So this led to the theory that she stole the money from work they found out, and she was told to either quit on the spot or they would investigate and press charges. Meaning there was a good chance she might not have just stolen the money once. She then got a job with a company called Rainbow selling vacuum cleaners and accessories on commission only. She bragged about how quickly she was making money and how it was faster than hourly pay. I have worked commission-only jobs and they can pay well. Just wasn't sure how she was making good money selling vacuum cleaners and accessories. When I worked commission-only jobs, it was flooring, pools, cars, expensive things that paid well. Apparently, selling vacuum cleaners and accessories did not pay well because she and her family were getting evicted. This was after they got evicted from the apartment they had lived in for over a decade. That apartment was the one they moved into after getting scammed on a rental house where they lost most of their money. She paid the money before even seeing the rental house because, honestly, I do not even know how she fell for that. It was about $1,500 that she paid only to find out that she got scammed when the owners of the house told her it was not for rent. They got evicted for the second time that summer. They had not even been in the second apartment for 5 months before they got evicted. Her husband was super drunk, high on whatever drug he was on, and beat my sister and their oldest daughter severely. My sister went to the hospital and he went to jail. My sister and her children moved in with our mom. Almost 10 years later, my sister works as a receptionist with no drive or desire to do anything else. She has decided that she will live with our mom forever. She has outsourced raising her kids to our mom and does the absolute least amount of work around the house as possible. Our mom calls me about once a week to complain and has made it clear that once the last kid moves out, and the youngest is a high school senior with an acceptance letter to a college 3 hours away, my sister is going to have to do something because this cannot continue. She is not going to wait on my sister hand and foot forever. Her husband served about 6.5 months in a boot camp-style jail program, was sentenced to 20 years probation, and occasionally I look him up and find that he has been in and out of jail for violating the no drugs or alcohol part of his probation. He spent one Thanksgiving in jail because he gave a false name to a police officer. He got the 6.5-month sentence because he had no prior convictions. She later told us that he beat her and her children regularly, but she never called the police, so he had no priors when he was arrested, thus the light sentence. My sister thought that was unfair, Our mom just told her this is what happens when you let dangerous people get away with their crimes. So, in less than a year, my sister went from living with her husband and kids, working in a decently paying manager job where they seemed to be doing well, to having to live with our mom and having zero desire to improve. Story 29. I think Rudy Giuliani is a very notable example. Story 30. My ex-best friend was the kindest soul. She was literally the epitome of a perfect person. Anytime I needed a shoulder to cry on, she would be there. Last August, she met a boy. They moved in together about a month later. Ever since she has been with him, she has become really nasty, completely changed. I caught her speaking badly about me, saying things about my looks and my relationship. It really hurt. She also gossiped a lot and never had a nice thing to say about anyone. She became very toxic and complained that I was not spending enough time with her, even though I saw her at least every week. She would cancel plans to be with her boyfriend, who she lived with. I made the difficult decision to cut her off completely in February. I have to admit, life has been peaceful since then, but I miss the old her terribly. I think about her and what she is doing all the time. However, in her story, I am the villain for cutting her off. I still cry over our friendship, and I miss the old her more than she will ever know. Story 31. A guy I knew in college was very smart, maybe a little cocky, but generally a good person. He was pre-med, usually set the curve, got into a great medical school, and definitely gave off future Nobel Prize winner vibes. About a year later, his father was arrested for tax evasion or a similar white-collar crime, and he completely snapped. He dropped out of medical school, went down a dark rabbit hole of drugs, and ultimately died in a shootout with the police a year later. Story 32. A man was single into his late 30s, had a great corporate career, got married, sold his house, and started a family all within 18 months. A few weeks after his daughter started crawling, he went to pick her up and ruptured 2 discs in his lower back. He had surgery but came out in worse pain than before and developed clots in his legs. He ended up having a pulmonary embolism, which he barely survived, only to be put on large quantities of opioid painkillers. He was out of work for 2.5 years, could not keep a job, and attempted suicide on the way to work one morning. His engine stalled, which must have flipped a switch for him. After 7 years of opioid use, he detoxed at home by himself, got clean, found a job, and has been sober since. 10 years later, he ruptured another disc and now needs fusion surgery, which he will undergo without taking any opioid painkillers. Please say a prayer. I need all the help I can get. Story 33. From my own experiences, about 12 to 13 years ago, I got married in Indian culture. I wasn't happy but went along with it. It started great, then the verbal assaults began. Soon it turned physical from her to me, but I never raised my hand. I went into a slow downward spiral of heavy drinking every day after work, spending up to 6 to 7 hours in the pub just to get away from being home. This lasted about 2 to 3 years. I finally bit the bullet and moved out, staying with friends and working overnight shifts. My family didn't want to know me, as I had disrespected the family name by going through a divorce. The drinking got worse. I subsequently lost my job as a result and genuinely felt there was no way out. Then, lo and behind, a friend of the family reached out. She was living in rented accommodation and offered to take me in after speaking with her landlord, who accepted. I moved to the other side of London, got myself a job starting from scratch, and did my best to stay off alcohol. Fast forward 10 years. I am now teetotal, married again for 7 years, have a 4-year-old son and 2 dogs, and am a homeowner. Story 34. My father said that people who committed suicide were selfish and weak. Then, after a breakup nearly 4 years ago at Christmas, he committed suicide. Story 35. My best friend, Matt, owned a home, had 2 dogs he adored and cared for, and had a successful job. He decided to try methamphetamine one day in 2022, and it derailed his life. He lost both dogs. They have since been adopted and are well. Set his house on fire, lost his job and his car, and refused help. He developed paranoia and distrusted family and friends who tried to support him. He passed away in January 2024 after taking his own life. I still have a hard time accepting that it turned out the way it did. He was one of the smartest people I knew and a great friend. Story 36. Probably my own. I was a dirtbag heroin addict since high school and for years after. I was stealing from family and friends and burned many bridges. After joining the military and serving honorably for 6 years, it completely changed me. I am the most successful I have ever been in my life. I have a huge savings and am going to school for computer science utilizing my government-issued education benefits. I am beyond proud of myself. Story 37. I know a master sergeant with 18 years served who was in a gang and has a sealed record from crimes he committed as a child. Now he is a straightforward, highly focused master sergeant in the United States Army who is about to finish his 20 years of service with a couple of degrees the government paid for and a diverse skill set. I hear one of these complete turnaround stories in the Army at least once a week. Story 38. My brother went from pre-med to unemployed steadily for over a decade. I was the one my parents worried about. 20 years in engineering somehow. Story 39. Went downhill due to substance abuse and a suicide attempt. Lost the family home and ended up divorced. Got clean, purchased a larger home, secured a stable job, and started a new family with a partner and children. Still have personal struggles but managed to get through each day. Story 40. Back when I was young, I had a friend named Stan. I worked with Stan at the grocery store, and Stan turned out to be a significant marijuana dealer. He had the courage to go to Mexico, buy cannabis for $50 or $100 a pound, and then drive it back to sell in quarter-pound quantities. He eliminated a few middlemen this way. I remember once going into his garage, where there were probably a couple of pallets of cannabis, neatly wrapped in plastic. He maintained his grocery store job and part-time student status, and eventually graduated from the University of Texas at Arlington. He understood the importance of keeping a low profile and was seemingly very careful. Today, he is a preacher, and I know he still has a motorcycle he bought with his cannabis money 40 years ago. From the people I know who still know him, he is completely straight-laced, no drinking, drugs, or anything like that. It is part of his story at times. But in 1983, he was the source and the life of the party. Story 41. I had this roommate once. She was a rave every weekend, get hammered, and do whatever drugs came her way kind of girl. The man she was seeing cheated on her at the Electric Daisy Carnival in a threesome on the Ferris wheel, on video, after he told her he was celibate for religious reasons. He had taken her to his church, her first time ever attending, the week prior to this. When she found out, she continued to go to his church, met a straight-laced Catholic man, and within a few months was married and living that God-loving life. This girl went from Sullivan King raves and benders every weekend, sleeping wherever and taking whoever's drugs, to a church first thing Sunday morning kind of person and being a traditional housewife. Story 42. A school classmate from a good family that was very well off by local standards. I knew his parents. His dad was cool but didn't say much. His mom is one of the genuinely nicest people I know. He had it all growing up. The cool clothes, the cool car, toys, trips, and more. He went to college for a business degree so he could get a job at the same place his dad worked and follow the same career path up to a vice president or chief executive officer position. Everything went well until he was in his early 40s and got caught performing various sexual acts on himself on camera for what he thought was a 15-year-old girl. She was not 15 but was a state police officer instead. He served more than 3 years of a 5 to 6 year sentence. He is on the sex offender registry until he is in his 90s. His big vice president or chief executive officer career path ended abruptly. He now lives in a small trailer park and works a warehouse and manufacturing job that keeps him away from any children. Story 43. Getting sober and taking his health and family life seriously. Story 44. This fellow I went to high school with was a real knucklehead. He did drugs, dealt drugs, and skipped class. One time he walked into our history class and asked me if he looked straight. His eyes were wide open. He said he had to swallow a bunch of acid tabs because the school security officer called him to his office to search him, and he felt that taking that much acid was the best course of action. Fast forward to senior year, he tried out for the cheerleading squad on a dare and made it. It turned out he enjoyed it much more than he thought he would and dedicated himself to getting stronger and improving his skills. He cleaned up his act, actually graduated on time, and attended a small college, possibly on scholarship, where he was a cheerleader as well. Last I checked, he was sober and working as a personal trainer, which was the last thing I ever expected him to do, but good on him. Story 45. My mom used to deny the Holocaust. I could not accept this. I took her to the Holocaust Museum, had her speak with rabbis, and introduced her to many Jewish people. She spent a lot of time with the Jewish community. She completely changed her view, and now she cannot believe it happened only once. Story 46. Tiger Woods. He was so young and so fast. He was destined to be the greatest golfer of all time by leaps and bounds. Then his father died, and problems with his wife followed. He fell apart like a paper doll left out in the rain. Story 47. There was a smart student, my neighbor, who was expected to join medical school. He decided to take a gap year and went abroad for work and cultural experiences, or so I assumed. When he returned a year later, he had completely changed. He became conservative, religious, and focused on calmness and meditation as if it were his full-time job. He refused to push hard in life and did not enroll in any college for years, at least not until I moved away from the neighborhood. Story 48. My sister went from being a terrible drug addict who ruined our entire family to being the person who would care for my children if anything happened to me or my wife. Story 49. Eva Perón started as a young small-town prostitute and became the wife of the fascist president of Argentina. Story 50. Kurt Waldheim. From Nazi soldier to Secretary General of the United Nations. Quite a remarkable and controversial history. Story 51. The man was a very successful lawyer in the Washington, D.C. area and decided that his life was too boring, so he turned to drug trafficking. He is still doing it successfully and seems very happy and content. Story 52. My ex-best friend. Great job. Adored her adopted daughter. Owned her own house. Her first husband left her, and then she started dating and eventually married a coworker who introduced her to drugs. They both failed drug tests at work. He died of alcohol poisoning, and she began drinking heavily and taking pills. A few times, her daughter found her near death and had to call emergency services. Eventually, her daughter moved in with her father. My friend ended up losing her cat, her home, and everything she owned. She used everyone in her life until she had nowhere to turn. She was last seen at a homeless shelter in Texas in February, and she said they were going to kick her out. A group called Watchmen's Ministry took her in, and she has completely disappeared. I miss my friend. I don't know why she still haunts me. She cut me out of her life very abruptly in 2017, despite us being best friends since 1987. I guess I want to know why and what happened to her. I realize I will likely never know, and that drives me crazy. Story 53. I was raised in foster care after my parents died. I was emancipated at 17. 6 months later, I was waiting in county jail to serve 3 years in a Texas prison. I got out and turned everything around. I made $200,000 last year and love my life. Story 54. For 6 years, I had constant severe heel pain that made me disabled. I walked with crutches. I had to carefully plan every walking route I took. Often, I couldn't make it through a Walmart trip without needing to stop and rest on the floor. I never took my textbooks to class because the weight of a couple of textbooks made it hard to get through the day. At home, I would often walk on my knees or crawl on the floor. Most of the time, when I could go no further, kind people would help me walk. Sometimes I was just left there on the ground. I saw many different doctors. They mostly thought it was plantar fasciitis, but no treatment seemed to work. Suddenly, one of the doctors got it right. It was a rare nerve disorder called tarsal tunnel syndrome, not unlike carpal tunnel syndrome. He diagnosed it by having a doctor inject a painkiller directly into the suspected nerve sheath. The first time in 6 years, I felt no pain. Soon I had surgery, and once my foot healed, I was amazed that I had basically no more mobility limitations. I went from struggling to make it through my daily activities to dancing for hours at a wedding. This surgery coincided with my university graduation, and I was able to get many seasonal jobs one after another and do biological fieldwork like I had always dreamed of. I tromped through marshes, hiked through deserts, and camped in forests, all things that would have been totally impossible before. It really was a complete turnaround. Felt like a miracle, honestly. Now I always appreciate my health, and whenever I see someone mobility impaired from age or any other cause, I greatly empathize with them. Story 55. The individual was an excellent student with a scholarship pursuing an engineering degree. He smoked marijuana, possibly laced, for the first time and experienced his first psychiatric break. He was admitted to our unit unable to hold a thought and was discharged in stable condition but still diagnosed with schizophrenia. There was no previous psychiatric history. He essentially dropped out of college and is now cared for by his parents because he can barely perform his activities of daily living independently. It is uncertain if he will ever complete his degree or live independently. Story 56. I had a very liberal friend who used to sell LSD while following the band Grateful Dead in an old school bus and going to rainbow gatherings. One day, he argued with me for an hour about how offensive the Washington football team's name was. Now, he is a diehard supporter of Donald Trump who criticizes social justice warriors and sensitive people. Story 57. Back in March, I had one job, lived in a nice neighborhood, and had few cares in the world. Fast forward to April 2024, my mother passed away, making me the sole financial caretaker for my father, who has dementia. His care costs $9,000 per month, paid entirely out of pocket. I now have 2 full-time remote jobs and some side jobs that, without disclosing too much, could potentially get me in serious trouble. However, I do not have much of a choice if I have to come up with an extra $9,000 every month. I moved to a poorly maintained, bug-infested apartment in a terrible part of town to save as much money as possible. In the span of a few months, my life went from easy street to something resembling a low-budget Breaking Bad knockoff. Story 58. My cousin faced some challenges growing up, but ultimately graduated high school, got into his dream college, and was living his dream college life snowboarding every weekend with every opportunity available to him. He came home one winter break and relapsed into heroin use, spending the next 8 years cycling between rock bottom and rehabilitation until he finally overdosed. Story 59. My husband's mistress cheated on her wealthy, established high school sweetheart husband with my ex. She was always on lavish trips, going to nice restaurants, and he even bought her a Birkin bag. She never had to do her own taxes. He took care of all the financial matters. My ex is unemployed, likely broke, and has been out of work for a year to run off with her. When they need to find jobs again, his prospects will be slim. I imagine they are deep in credit card debt since both lost their jobs. She gave up the life most women dream of, rich and a wonderful husband, for a fellow cheater and lazy opportunist. Story 60. I've had many major changes in my life. I did financially okay for my age and had a relatively comfortable job in life. Then I joined the military after the September 11th attacks. I performed well in the military, but after I got out and faced a significant career disappointment, I became unemployed for many years. I was unemployed for many years but went back to school and earned an advanced degree, which helped me secure a decent job. In a way, I'm just waiting for the next event to turn my world upside down again, and can't help but feel it will happen because of my past experiences. One of these days, I might suddenly pass away or find out I have cancer. Story 61. One of my friends and their gradual descent into dependence on alcohol. It is truly awful watching someone you care about have their life spiral out of control due to drinking. Story 62. I knew someone who was a nurse. She was organized. She was married and had a few children. She got into a car accident and was prescribed oxycodone for pain. The prescriptions ran out, and by then she was addicted. She was told that methamphetamine gives a similar high, so she tried methamphetamine and never looked back. She lost her nursing license and her driver's license. Her husband divorced her and took the children. She is in jail for the 3rd time in a year and is facing prison time. Story 63. A restaurant dishwasher with alcoholism was co-workers with my father-in-law in the 1990s. The man used to be an accountant, owned an acreage, had a wife and son, but was now barely scraping by. My father-in-law asked what happened, And it turned out that years prior, the man was into snowmobiling and had bought his son a snowmobile for Christmas so they could ride around the countryside through the forest together. His son, in his young teens, had begged to lead them on a ride. So the father let him lead, but did not know there was razor wire set up on a path in a forest area. His son's head literally landed in his lap. Turned out he just needed to numb his mind after something like that. Cannot blame him. Story 64. I witnessed one of the most surprising transformations in a person's life, and it happened with a very close friend. During his youth, he was trapped in a cycle of addiction, endless partying, and toxic relationships. It was common for him to get into trouble, to the point where many thought he would never break free from that destructive path. Everything changed suddenly. After facing a series of legal and health issues caused by his lifestyle, he had a moment of clarity. He decided it was time to make a radical change. He enrolled in a rehabilitation program, began surrounding himself with people who supported him, and avoided environments that pulled him back into his old habits. Over time, he started studying to become an addiction counselor, with the goal of helping others who were going through the same struggles he had overcome. Today, not only is he completely sober, but he also dedicates his life to supporting others in their recovery process. He went from being someone many considered beyond help to becoming an inspiration to others, living a full, healthy, and purposeful life. Without a doubt, it has been the most drastic change I have ever seen in someone. Story 65. A kid I went to high school with was one of those young Republicans always going to church, and even scored a 100% conservative rating on a political party association survey we all took. It had been 6 years before I last heard he had been bisexual through college, attended pride parades, and was advocating for Hillary Clinton for president. Story 66. I used to mix methamphetamine and fentanyl in the same bag, crushing it and snorting, smoking, and injecting it all day, every day. Now I have been 9 months clean, working full-time, and raising my child on my own. Feels like a miracle to me. Sorry if it comes off as bragging. Story 67. The son of the district superintendent took many honors classes with me throughout high school. He was an honors graduate and received scholarship offers. About 9 years after we graduated high school, he appeared in a news report. He had been involved in home burglaries. Police caught him in the act, and he fired shots at them while fleeing. He faced charges of attempted capital murder. After 3 separate trials, he was eventually convicted of attempted murder and is serving a 40-year sentence. This is very different from the straight and true honors student classmate we knew during our high school years. Story 68. I was a loser college dropout. I joined the Army, loved it, and applied for and was accepted into a commissioning program. It changed my life forever. Story 69. Memorized 9 sparkle versed angle, saw cautious whole caption memory. Story 70. Not sure of the biggest, but drugs and alcohol are always the culprits. Story 71. One of my role models had a dream life. A $75,000 salary 20 years ago. For any teenagers here, that salary back then allowed you to live like the multi-level marketing gurus on YouTube, multiple vehicles, a gorgeous home in a very nice part of town, a life I literally dreamed of having for myself. Then this role model started using drugs. Somehow felonies became involved, and everything down to the dishes in the kitchen was impounded and lost. Now homeless. So sad. Story 72. I see him in the mirror every day. If my wife and children had seen me 2 decades ago, they would not have believed their eyes. I became a faithful, family-loving man the moment I met my wife. Story 73. A friend I had in high school was a total mess. He had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and depression, and the school was not doing anything to help. If anything, they made it worse. All our teachers disliked him. I was honestly worried about him, but a few years later, I ran into him during a local festival. He is doing great. He has a good construction job, a wife, and a baby girl that he loves more than anything. Story 74. My wife was working at an auto parts store some time ago. She had one client who was consistently irate with everyone who served him. He would often come with a friend who was clearly intoxicated, even during the daytime. This angry man was red in the face most of the time and heavy-set, which led us to suspect drinking with his friend. One day, my wife had enough of his behavior and confronted him. She told him, "You may want to see a doctor because you look like you're about to have a heart attack." She did not see him for a while, but when she did not recognize him. He had lost more than 30 pounds, was no longer with his intoxicated friend, and was friendly. He approached her at work and said, "You saved my life. I took your advice and went to see my doctor. My blood pressure was dangerously high, and I was on the verge of a stroke." He changed his diet, started exercising, and returned a changed man. He continued to lose weight and was in the best shape of his life. Story 75. I suffered from severe depression since the age of 18. After attempting suicide twice, I left the military at 22 and became an alcoholic and cocaine addict. I went from one catastrophe to the next, spending time in a mental hospital, police cells, and lost everything. It cost me all that was good in my life, and I had come to accept that I would die young, and I was okay with that, relieved even. Now I'm 38, I've beaten all my addictions, been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, so the correct medication really makes a difference, and I've even quit smoking. I still use an electronic cigarette though. Guys have to have something, for goodness sake. I've started my own successful business, have a loving family and children, and finally own my own home. I'm grateful for my life now and glad I didn't end it early. Story 76. He was a really good high school football player. Made it to college. Ended up partying a little too much. Smoked some marijuana, got very drunk, and passed out naked in the quad. He was discovered by campus security. He is now a Pentecostal preacher. It is not confirmed whether he actually uses snakes in his service. Story 77. Someone my husband knew was a site supervisor on a building site, earning decent money with good career prospects. He had a really decent girlfriend and a little boy. One night he got very drunk and, being foolish, kicked a car that was driving past. He ended up completely smashing his lower leg and foot, which ended his job. He developed a severe alcohol and drug problem. His girlfriend left him and took their son. He alienated all his friends and refused help from anyone. He lost his flat, and the last time we saw him, he was sitting outside a homeless shelter in the next town. It is tragic that one moment of madness completely destroyed his life. Story 78. A former friend used to live with his unemployed mother. He was overweight and did not have a career or education. He was also bullied at school. He taught himself programming, works in the field now, has a girlfriend, and makes quite a lot of money. He is of average weight now as well. Story 79. I used to work with two siblings, a brother and sister, in a restaurant. They were daily binge drinkers and basically abused whatever drugs they could get their hands on that day. At the same time, they were very kind and trustworthy people. I used to walk over an hour to and from that job, and they would always offer to drive me home even though I saw they could only afford to put $2 to $4 in gas at a time. I got to know them well enough that I met the sister's husband, who basically did the same as the other two. It turns out he was being put on medications related to a brain issue he had surgery for in the past and ended up dying from mixing a new medication with alcohol. A few months later, his wife overdosed and died, leaving the brother alone. He had no family left and had been an addict for 20 years at this point. He ended up disappearing and appeared on my social media about a year later. He had gotten sober for the first time since he was a teenager and is trying very hard to live a healthy life. I hope he can succeed. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.